Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Rubicon podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Daksh, the founder of Greptile, with us. And today, we're going to talk about code search and what's happening in all the new things in code generation. So, Daksh, welcome to the podcast. We want to know all about what you're building and who you are. So, we'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi guys. Rubicon. That's a cool name for a pod. I actually just canonically, I just joined this Zoom call, and they were like, "This is a podcast." Actually, this is all new to me. Um, I'm Daksh, one of the co-founders of a company called Greptile. We're building AI tools for developers. We build an AI expert that can understand and search very large code bases in English, and we offer this as an API and a series of integrations. The API lets developing teams build their own internal dev tools on top of this thing that understands your code base. An example of this would be connecting it to your Sentry so it can see an incoming Sentry alert and turn it into like a bug report and tell you like what's going wrong and why and how to fix it. The integrations that are first party for us, the most popular one is our code review bot, which uses this like code based context understanding to review pull requests. This one's our most popular one, growing very fast. Currently, we're in about 550 companies. We're growing like 20% every week. Just trying to keep up with everything. And it's a dizzying space to be building in, but we've chosen not to focus on code gen because I think there's enough smart people doing that, and focus on other stuff instead. Because I think we recently I had dinner with one of my friends who works at Pinterest, and he said that he spends 40% of his time programming. This is like an SDE one. So that means there's 60% of unoptimized software development that we focus on.
That's very cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, I feel like there's also so much money that has been pumped into like a handful of companies in that space. So that is like this whole other aspect that is totally untapped. So would love to know how you actually came across the idea. And I know you had some fun ways to get your first couple of customers. I think we all want to hear about all those Reddit and hackathon
Well,
stories.
even before that, just like the very origin of the company.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll speed run through the pre-Greptile days. But basically, I was an undergrad at Georgia Tech. I met my co-founder now, Suhoon, at a startup class, and we started working on stuff together. And it's a very interesting path where most college startups will start out with a consumer idea, which is what we did. Our idea was a shopping assistant that is like a browser extension, which for a college startup maybe even pretty novel. At least we didn't come up with like bill spreading app or something like that. That's the one we came up with. So we worked on that for a little bit. Then we did so if you survive long enough to realize that you shouldn't be building consumer tar pits, you will try to find like plausible B2B ideas as a person that's never been in business. So the plausible B2B idea that we came to was we were going to build a chatbot that collects reviews and feedback on behalf of customers over text. And this was supposed to be a flow chart at first, and the idea was that as these like because we started working with like DaVinci 2 and stuff at the time, and as these models would get better, this thing could be more intelligent, more conversational, like try to understand like what people actually don't like about the product. So you could like scale the experience of a founder talking to like customers and getting their feedback. Turns out the target customer we had doesn't really care about getting feedback, and review APIs are too locked in, and we also just didn't really understand B2B. So at this point, we're in San Francisco. We moved to San Francisco. We raised a little bit of money. We moved out here. We were all living in an Airbnb. Our third co-founder, Vaishnav, had just after spending, we all graduated. He spent a couple of months at home in Singapore, and then he came to our Airbnb. He lands at night, and I text the group chat and I say we should all talk. This is like a Friday night in July. It was July 14th. July 14th, Friday night. We're sitting in on this dining table, and I say, guys, I think this startup is not working. We've let go of our like very nice jobs, and we're here in San Francisco in the worst Airbnb in the world, and we have to figure out what we're going to do next. And the reason I know it's July 14th is because July 15th was a Saturday, and that was the Scale AI hackathon, and they all signed up for that because like it's a fun SF event for us to all do and take our mind off things. So we went to that event. And that morning we were in line in Soma, and we were going to do this like hackathon. It's like we should build something here. And at this point, we're just like the only thing that we actually know how to do is code. And so maybe we should build a developer tool. Like that seems reasonable. And it seems like these models are like pretty good at programming. At the time, like Copilot was just autocomplete. And this idea that you could like use a GPT, which is at the time a language model for programming, was actually relatively novel. it feels crazy to think that it was a novel a year ago, considering how like pervasive it is now. But at the time, it was. And we decided to first we were like, well, we should build a documentation writer that automatically writes documentation for internal code. And we thought about it a little bit more. And we were like, well, if you can document code, you probably don't need documentation because you can just like ask the code the questions, and the code should be able to answer, because everything that's true about your product is like in a line of code somewhere. So surely you could answer questions like just from the code base. So we decided, this is like 10 a.m. and we're like quarreling over this like table with a bunch of stale sandwiches, and we're like, we're gonna do this project. We're gonna take 1 week from our current startup. It is not working, and if we can get revenue within the first like 10 days, then we'll pivot. If we can make like any amount of money in the first 10 days. So we spent the entire day building this thing. And then by the mid-afternoon, I'm not a very good programmer. My two co-founders are. I'd pretty much gotten to a point where like everything that was easy to do I'd already done. So we had like a couple of hours while they were finishing their stuff. I was like, I'll fill out the YC application. So because it was like early AI interviews, so we decided to just fill it out. And we were like, hey, we built this thing. It's starting to work a little bit, and then we're gonna put it out tomorrow. We're gonna take the rest of the weekend to build it, and then on Monday we'll put it out, and then we'll see what people think. So we kept working on it. Submitted the YC application. Spent all of Sunday working on it. Spent all of Monday working on it, and then Monday night when I was starting to get ready, I made a list of the like 200 people I knew that I had their phone numbers or their emails that like were software engineers. And then I sent the link to like every single one. And I was like, hey, check this out. I would love your feedback. And then people used it. People shared it with their friends, like, because they're like, oh, the promise of this is exciting. Like, there's this thing I can talk to and it understands this code base. And we basically were like, okay, well, we're going to do like fundamental YC stuff, which is we're going to just we're going to like put Stripe into this as quickly as possible and start like giving people a way to pay us. And then we're going to just iterate. Like, we're going to talk to people, make the product better, keep doing that over and over and over again. So we put Stripe in on like day 9. I think someone paid us $5 a month. Like some random person that's our LinkedIn post paid us $5 a month and signed up for it. I should probably track this person down. Maybe like a interesting conversation. Started using it. We basically would spend like the first half of the day like talking to people that had joined our Discord, and it was just like such a ragtag group, and we were just building for whoever would pay us. At the time, there was a Discord server of veterans that built Minecraft mods, and that really taken on this product because like the Minecraft engine is very difficult to understand, and they would use Greptile to use, and that's actually why we have multi-repo functionality, is because they wanted to put their own code and like the Minecraft engine code in the same context and chat with it. So we basically kept iterating this throughout, and revenue kept growing. Like that, we were growing 20% week over week at the time, and like when YC got back to us about an interview, we were at 100 paying users and we were growing 20% every week. So we got in, and the first thing they told us was like, hey, this is really cool. You should probably figure out what the business is here, because I don't think you're going to get to like $1 billion company, $20 hobbyist at a time. So, while it clearly you built something someone wants, so like maybe figure out like what the business version of this is. And by this point, we were pretty far ahead of the curve in terms of how well this thing understood code base context compared to everything else. Like, it was like a night and day difference between this and like something like GitHub's Copilot Chat, which at the time was a very new product also. So iterated very fast, got to like trying out different business ideas, and we're like, well, what if this could be like a Copilot for site reliability people, or like maybe this could be a Copilot for like, I don't know, like chip engineers, because they don't really understand like OS code, but they need to understand it or whatever. We tried all these stuff, none of it really stuck. And then towards the end, one of our customers asked us if we wanted, if like we had an API, because he wanted to build a code review bot on top of our like underlying code base context, because we were just using the GPT-4 API at the time. And like, he's like, yeah, I mean, this is cool, and like it finds stuff, but it doesn't have context, so it doesn't like work that well. It needs to have wider context of the code base. So like, yeah, sure. And then we built up like a Notion page and put the raw AWS API on it with no keys. And we're just like, here it is. You try like build with this, I guess. And then he used it, and he was like, he built it, and we're like, okay, we should probably we'll find a way to charge you. We'll just like count the number of API calls you made from our logs, and then just give you a bill at the end of the month. So we just did that for like a little bit, and we're like, wait, this is the product. So then we formalized the API, sent it out to people, like started building tools on top of it, and that really started to stick. And so by the time demo day rolled around, we were back to growing even faster. This time we had real businesses using the product, and to put together a round. We talked like 50 investors in those 2 weeks. It was like a lot more interest than we were anticipating. um, closed the round basically like within a week of us starting, and decided to just keep building, keep growing, keep doing the same thing we've been always done. Just talk to customers, get more customers. The code review bot took off as its own product. So what the current shape of the product is, we're basically thinking of it as like a retool for AI dev tools. So like all these software teams have very specific needs because they run their software teams in their own like weird way. Um, and software teams are fairly unique this way. Like I mean, like sales teams all run the same way. They all have like Salesforce. They all have like regions and market segments. They'll have an SDR that finds a lead, gives it to an AE, and so on. But software teams are like completely unique. Every software team runs differently. Everything from whether or not you have a QA person on every software team, or like whether or not you have in-house tooling for like CI/CD, or you like buy off the shelf stuff. Like everything is different. So we're figuring out what is the right primitive to give you to enhance your like life cycle with AI. And we start with API. That's the lowest level primitive, and you say, here's this like senior engineers in API. Like go figure out how you're going to plug this into your SDLC, and we let people just like imagine different ways to do that. And that's been really interesting. I mean, there's a combination of people building internal tools. There's some people that are like building whole businesses. There's a Swedish startup that's building a Jira competitor that's like very strongly built on the Greptile API because it's like Jira that understands your code base. So it's like really fun to. There's something very gratifying as a developer tools person to like see people like build interesting things on top of your tech.
That's very cool. And then I know, like, and we briefly touched on this, which is like you're very good at marketing and actually like drumming up business because of, and like a lot, like you mentioned, like lots of developers use kind of got to know about this almost in this organic way. Can you talk more about how you've done some of the marketing stuff, and then along with that, just like unique ways and funny ways of getting users?
Yeah, honestly, like I think our method of getting users was like more flashlight than laser. Where like we just tried a bunch of stuff and like some of it stuck. We just tried it with a lot of paranoia. I think the way we thought about it was, so at the start, because we had this like strong conviction, like we were gonna like developer tools companies tend to be very anti-revenue early on, and we were like, okay, well, two of us are engineers, and they're gonna have like the engineering mindset. I'm gonna have the revenue mindset. And it was like we're gonna keep growing week after week after week. So we wrote down on this like spreadsheet. We're like, today's week 0 today, and it's like week 0 to week 52, and we have to grow 10% every week. And every week, our entire existence is like, can we get 10% more than we got last week, and just keep doing that week after week after week. And it was like, sure enough, like if we keep doing this, in theory, that would mean we would like have a lot of revenue at the end of the year. So we would do just anything possible to hit that. When you have a clear goal like that, we're like, okay, I'm at 200 MRR right now, and I need to be at 220 MRR by the end of the week. It's Monday today, by Friday I need to be 220 MRR. You will the creativity that is spawned by that like well-defined optimization problem is extraordinary. Like it's you will do anything possible to get like one more user to pay you $20 a month. So we would go to Reddit and just find anyone that was vaguely asking the question of like, how do I talk to my code base? Or like, is there anything that's like ChatGPT would understand your code base? And we just like reply with, oh, check out Greptile. We kept doing that over and over again. We tried all kinds of things. Like we emailed like newsletters to get featured on newsletters. We would send it to everyone possible. We would go to events and literally just like give out food there and like get like, hey, like you're a startup founder. Do you want to try this thing? It's like very useful. And they'd mostly say no. And sometimes they'd say yes. They're like just amused by the idea of this like startup that's selling like, I don't know, like this is the type of way in which you would sell like a pop-up cupcake shop, is like you'd run around and on the sidewalks in San Francisco, like giving people free samples and being like, hey, you should check out our cupcake shop. But doing that for developer tools is like kind of funny. So I think people enjoy the novelty of it. So we just did that, like all kinds of weird things. Some of the stuff that stuck, we decided to do a referral program, which is not something that works for B2B usually. We did like a give a free month, get a free month referral program. And all right, the idea of that was not actually for growth. It was like, well, we can, if you like it, if you like the promise of it, you'll try it. If you like the initial set, you will pay for it. And if you like it a lot, you'll keep using it and keep paying for it. And then we needed a way to like preemptively measure that final one without actually waiting for you to like for 3 months to pass since you signed up. So we're like, well, if you refer someone, you must really like it, because like you're going like willing to go out of your way to like get a friend of yours in just to get a free month, like after your first, second month and so on. So we did that, and that drove like 2/3 of our new growth for like months. 2/3 of our new users came from referrals. Like people, and this like it doesn't really work. Like people are so confused by this when we tell like old timers like, yeah, this is how we grew our like B2B startup, and they're like, your B2B startup grew from like CTOs at startups trying to save like $40 in their bill by referring someone. I was like, yeah, It's crazy.
Very
It's
believable.
people like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's people go
I
insane
speak
lengths
from
to,
first-hand experience.
yeah. So that we just did that, like, and that like led to a lot of growth too. I'm trying to think of what else we did. The energy drinks thing was fun. We made custom energy drinks that were like Greptile, like energy drinks for coders, because we were like, there's no energy drinks that are like targeted at coders or like academics, even though they consume so many energy drinks, like people that do like deep scientific work. So we were like, well, this is like a fun, like this energy drink for coders, and we just like found this manufacturer in Ohio to, or like Illinois or something, to make us like hundreds of cans of the stuff, and then we just got it shipped to our apartment, and then we would just give it out at like, we'd like airdrop it at like hackathons. We signed up for hackathons, show up, lay this stuff out by the drinks. They won't stop us from like giving free drinks to the hackathon, and then we just drop it and leave, and we'd leave like pamphlets there which had a code for a free month, and like the thing is, not a lot of people signed up from there, but like people would tweet about it, and that's like what would actually get us like traffic, because like it's like a drink that has a dev tools ad on it, and it like has the maximum amount of caffeine you can put into a drink before you have to get a prescription for it. So it was like, just, this is true. There's the
What is the maximum?
this manufacturer is very legit. It's 200 milligrams in a 12-ounce drink, which
Wow.
is like 3 cups of coffee almost, or 2.5 cups of coffee in
And
12
how,
No.
ounces.
on what cadence do you consume this yourself?
I've never had one. I've therefore I'm very serious about our marketing spend being spent only for marketing. Office snacks is a different budget.
That makes sense.
Operational discipline. I'm not a Zerpera founder.
And the one thing that really sticks out to me in this conversation is like just like how driven you are from like a growth and like a revenue perspective. And that's the one thing we've seen, which is like a lot of founders get caught almost like, which is like the time before you find product market fit, people are not as focused on revenue, and it feels like, okay, the slower we grow, even if we're growing slower, like that's totally fine, because when we hit product market fit, it's kind of just going to explode. But like it feels like from day one you've had this mentality of, hey, the product is going to evolve and we're going to figure out what the product is going to look like, but we have to keep growing, we have to keep finding new users. I would love to like, and like I think we all would love to understand like how do you actually like, how do you drive down that like personally, and then also like top down from you to like other people who are more engineering focused to actually being like more outcome focused.
Well, I've got one
Yeah,
question there. What do you think product market fit for Greptile actually looks like?
yeah, both great questions. So in terms of the like, you're totally right. That has crossed my mind in weeks where we didn't grow much. Is like, maybe it's fine that we're not growing much, because like one day we'll hit PMF and then we'll like explode. And I think part of it is just, well, what if it never comes? That's grim.
Mm.
Like then you're just like die one day and like no one cares. Um, so that thing's pretty scary. But also I think the problem of finding product market fit is like very poorly defined naturally, like when you like, naturally think about it. It's like, well, there's this like elusive thing where your startup explodes, and like you need a system to optimize to actually find it. Otherwise, there's like, it's just like this mystical thing that you will maybe happen upon if you wander the forest enough. But when there's system to optimize, it's like, well, yes, you have. I think of startups, and like the search for PMF sort of is like gradient descent, where let's say your startup is like this n-dimensional vector, and like you like this vector like captures everything about it, like who your customer is, what your product is, how you think about growth, who your team is, everything, and like you are allowed to move like steps. I actually don't know how neural networks work. You're allowed to move steps in like the direction of like looking for like to optimize this function, and there's the some like vector which is which is PMF. This is like the PMF vector, and like you need to start with a really specific vector and be like, this is my best guess. Here's a specific set of like numbers, and this is my best guess, so that you can know how wrong you are, because you have to then measure how wrong you are and then try to grow. Like what you're basically, the test of did you grow 10% this week or not is a test of like, are you like
The
close to
right
the
direction.
vector, that like final vector, or are you far from it? That's almost your loss function. Your growth rate that month is like an inverse loss function almost. And if the faster you grow, the closer you are to PMF basically. But you actually need to measure how close you are by seeing how fast you can grow. And then that
And
makes the problem like so much more well defined. It's like, oh, all I have to do is just keep growing every week, and like if I keep doing that, and like, and growing is hard if your company sucks. And so then like naturally, if the goal is to grow really fast, then you want to make your company suck less, and that like making your company suck less is like what PMF is.
I totally agree with you. I think that is like the one thing that people don't get, which is like if you actually grow really fast, you have to make your company suck last, and then like you will eventually like you're actually like almost like aligning your company towards PMF by growing really fast, which like rather than like kind of finding this like mystical unicorn that like you mentioned, like if you roam the forest enough, you'll get it. And one of my friends described it as like you're trying to hit like these like full court shots, and if you take enough of them, you'll get one. But like it's unclear if you'll die before that. So you might as well like try your best and like try to grow. Try to get as many people to has hit as many shots so that you actually end up getting one.
Yeah, yeah, more shots on goal.
Or shots on goal. What do you think PMF actually looks like? I mean, I don't
I
think any
think
of
I
us.
think PMF I think PMF in this setup is like, I think it really is the thing that you know it when you see it. But the question of how do you get to a place where you know it when you see it is a question where you can actually locally optimize. Like what I like about your framing of it, Daksh, is that it's like the problem with PMF in general is you don't know what to do right now, right? And the problem of what to do right now is very, very clear when you're in like B2C or B2B, right? Like you have one number, you optimize the one number, and you throw whatever you want at that one number. And if it goes up, you're doing something right. That's it. It's very simple, right?
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I live in a more complicated industry, but like
yeah.
what I like about B2B and B2C is that it is that simple, right?
And it's
Like
even easier in B2B than
everything
it is in
coalesces
B2C.
around
Like
number.
B2B is almost
Yes,
formulaic,
yes,
actually, even compared
Very
to B2C.
mystical. Mm.
Yeah,
because it's less
And that's
mimetic.
yeah.
B2C is very mimetic, right?
yeah.
And that's why
Well,
venture
I mean, I
venture and
think
Silicon
DevTools
Valley.
actually is like a weird hybrid of the two, right? DevTools is sort of B2C and sort of B2B.
It's
And
B2C in the go to market often, but it is firmly
Yeah.
B2B in the product and like
right.
and everything else about it is B2B. Where like the consumer is a business essentially. Like you could it's a like in a sense all software is B2C in that a consumer does use it. Like Salesforce is used by like Salesforce isn't used by company, it's used by like salespeople at the company. So it's just who pays for it is the company, which in the case true for the case of DevTools too. It's like the company pays for it. Just like they're uniquely bottom up, but they're otherwise. But to ask you a question about like what does PMF look like? Well, I like there's I guess two like canonical definitions. And one being that there's it's like it feels like you're chasing a boulder rather than pushing a boulder. And then the second one around like yeah, basically you'll know it when you see it, which is that everything is just kind of everything is great and your biggest problem is like not growth. And so
Yeah.
what I'll say about where we are right now is I don't think we're at PMF. However, if like 6 to 12 months, like 6 months from now, or like 10 months from 12 months from now, we are at like firmly at PMF, and you asked me when we were at PMF, I'd say now. I'd say it was like a year
Yeah.
ago. Like that, it
Yeah.
had started to become clear like a year ago.
Yeah.
But like I wouldn't say that right now. Like it's obviously like a word that you don't want to throw around because then your optimization problem is complete, and you don't want to prematurely complete your optimization problem.
Yeah. And I
The
think
other thing,
go ahead, Vishnu.
go ahead, Shreya.
No, I was just gonna ask you on the AI side of things. I think when we met once, you kind of referenced to Greptile as the senior software engineer who never sleeps, so you can kind of tap on their shoulder and ask any questions. And like that's kind of the power of like LLMs and how like you're able to kind of understand these legacy code bases much better than anybody has before. I want to understand in terms like the real AI behind it, in terms like what are you using and like how are you able to like semantically search and understand these code bases much better than everybody else, because it feels like lots of people are working with code bases, but it feels like Reptile really has that differentiating factor, lock in and that PLG motion. So what is creating that high quality product and that sort of lock in for the
And I
customer?
remember once you told me that a lot of people who were doing search, like halfway through the batch, a lot of people who were doing search had pivoted out of it. And I was like, is
Yeah.
that a good sign? And you said, I said, is that a bad sign? You said, no, it's a good sign. Uh,
Yeah, so I think there's yeah, a lot of people try to do like code based understanding, and I think that so okay, I guess there's a couple of convictions here. So one is I think RAG is the solution to code based understanding, and then two, like everyone assumes that it's like naive RAG is the way to do it. Naive RAG is to treat a code base as a series. It's like a book where every page is a file. Like page one is index.ts, and like page two is like I don't know, login.ts, whatever it is. So like the assumption is that if you look at like RAG will look at this thing as like a book of files, and you will do top K on the pages given a user's query, and like that'll give you the right context, which is true if like for like docs and like book and actual books. That actually works pretty well because like every paragraph makes sense roughly on its own, and books are sequential in nature too. Whereas code bases are this like very unique type of data structure where they're this interconnected graph, logically speaking, and then they're structurally a tree. So you kind of have to like take into account that a lot of the data of a code base is like in how it's structured and how the different parts are connected. So we see this as a search problem because RAG is a search problem. Assuming generation is handled by like sufficiently powerful foundational LLMs, you're the only thing you have to worry about is actually search. So with search, there's two things you can optimize in a search problem, which is like you can optimize the indexing and the retrieval. So in the indexing step, we treat code bases like they are, which is that they're these like complicated data structures that are these interconnected like logical system graphs. And so we parse the syntax tree. We are now adding support for call graphs and just understanding the code base for what it is. And in the retrieval step, we start with like your typical semantic and keyword searches. Keyword searches are important because you'll name symbols sometimes and you want those to appear every time. And then we fine-tuned an agent, which we call the command click agent, which is this thing that like follows references inside the code base. So imagine if you were to ask like a senior engineer on your team, like, hey, how does like blah, blah, blah work in this code? Like, how does session management work? They probably don't know the answer off the top of their head, but they have a map of how the code base is and call that the index. Like they have a general map of where things are. So they'll start by like looking that up, and then likely the file that they looked at or the folder they looked at is not the right folder. What they have to do now is like the follow references, imports, function calls, etc. They will command click to find the right part of the code base for the problem. So we find unit agent to do command click basically, and follow references, follow imports, follow function calls, etc. And this was like the step function improvement in the quality of retrieval, because this basically meant this thing like actually understood what was happening. It understood like what the code base was and like how to find the right parts of the code base. The quality of the retrieval went way up, and at a point we were like, honestly, like as much as I like the chat UI, this like deep code context understanding thing is honestly kind of like it's wasted on the chat UI. Like it's so much more powerful than that, and then we were like, we should let people just build on this. Just give people an API, they'll build internal tools. They'll like developers will find a way to like use this in a way that's useful. And that's been true, which I think is like developers again, which is why like it's not B2C, it's not B2B, it's this whole different third thing, because it's the one type of like customer that actually knows how your thing works and cares and like can actually build on it and can understand complicated products. Like they don't need to be sold on the promise. Almost every other type of customer needs to be sold on the promise, but not developers. Developers have already made up their mind on the promise, and the question is, does your product deliver on the promise?
Yeah,
Question
and I think
there. Wait. So question there. I don't name. What are some of the like? Are there any obscure, like particular, or surprising, or interesting use cases of this code context API?
The Sentry one was interesting. The Slackbot was interesting. That was one of the early ones. I think the Swedish startup doing the like AI native Jira, that one's really fun because it actually makes sense for. So we built a linear integration really early on, which automatically adds instructions to new linear tickets. And this is one of those things that's like kind of counterintuitive that your dev tool should be inside of your task manager and not in your editor. And this idea being that like, well, your linear becomes like self-documenting. You'll create a ticket that says fix the bug where like the login page when you log in with Google like doesn't have the right callback, and it'll just be like, here's all the code you need to fix. Here are the affected parts of the code base. Here's the edge case you need to catch. It like automatically generates this just from given the code base and given the title. And he took the idea like way farther, like figuring out like who should be assigned this ticket based on what part of the code base is like affected. Like it's actually very interesting how deep they went into like using the API to build these interesting things. Another one that I'm interested in. So this is actually one that no one has tried to build yet, but I really hope someone will. Is I want an integration with like a Vanta or like a compliance software, so that when it has like findings in your code that are like about like compliance things that you aren't meeting, that it automatically either writes pull requests or just says here's what you need to fix to make your code compliant. It has like this code based understanding. That would be like so sick, but it kind of requires like Vanta doesn't expose sufficiently powerful API for this, so it would need to be like someone at Vanta would need to like basically help me build this.
No, yeah, and I think that's what's so powerful about the tool, right? That like because people are able to build on top of it, that creates like real lock-in, because like people have to spend some time to actually build it, but then once they build it, kind of everybody is using it. So how do you kind of envision the platform, or like evolving over time, and what is like the broader vision to like what does Greptile look like in 5 years when it's this like massive, I don't know, $1 billion run rate business? Like what does that look like?
So I
What
think we
about
would have figured out our primitives by then. Like, what do we need to? What are the building blocks that we need to offer? Because the API is not the answer. So I'll take the code review bot as the example. So at the absolute like left end of the primitive scale, you would offer the API that understands your code base, and that's all you do. And like, go figure out like how you're going to build a code review bot on top of this. At the absolute right end of the spectrum is a highly opinionated, unconfigurable code review bot that connects to your GitHub, reviews your pull requests, and like there's some amount of like the real answer is like somewhere in the middle. It's like, what do you offer that gives people like everything that's true for everyone's pull requests is like we're opinionated about those things, and then everything that should be configurable is configurable. So I think we would have figured out like what that block looks like. So maybe the block is actually, maybe the product is like a drag and drop build your own dev tool situation. Like one of the blocks is the Greptile like code based intelligence block, and you can like drag like, code review, and then you drag and say do like automatically re-review commits on the same pull request, and like that's your like logic flow. You're almost making like a flow chart for what should happen when a new pull request is created, and then make call to Greptile and have it like review summarize the pull request. Maybe that's what it looks like. We're our like unscalable thing we're doing right now is we pretty much just put out an opinionated code review bot, and we just keep adding configurability as people ask for it. And eventually we'll whittle down to the right amount of like the right order of primitive.
how many more step function improvements do you think are left in search? Or like how many more do you think are needed for like 99.999% accurate code search?
I don't know. I think there's definitely a couple of steps in the foundational model that need to get better, but I think there's plenty of stuff we can still do that'll make
Yeah.
it better. So I think a few. So I think about this way: a person given enough time, and like a person that's already an expert on the code base, like they're the one that wrote it. Like, this realistic person exists. Like there's someone out there that really knows like Kubernetes in and out. Like this person can probably answer questions more accurately than Greptile can. Like if you were to give them both like 100 hard questions, I think Greptile would get like 70, and this person would get like 75 or 80, or maybe like even more. And to me, like that means like, okay, we at least get as good as this person. Like surely we can get even better. Like we should be able to do everything this person does. It's a pretty well defined task is to answer a question based on a code base. The question is though that like will like models with sufficiently large and sufficiently cheap context windows just make like RAG like useless, which still is a good. I think it's still a good question. We think it's possible, but it's not necessary. Like, and a lot of people consider it like definitely true. We think it's possible, and we're protecting ourselves. We think it's possible enough that we're protecting ourselves from that situation by like creating this very thick wrapper where we have all these like workflows and all this other stuff. So like if it turns out that like the marginal cost of the millionth token has basically been driven to zero, then we can just hot swap our retrieval with like just a very powerful foundational model, and that works well. And we have all this other workflow and everything. From a customer's perspective, nothing changes. It's like under the hood, there's a whole new thing now. We leave that possibility open, but it's unclear whether that'll happen.
I think it's 2 years out.
Yeah, maybe. It would need to get like extremely. So you would need to have a 10 million context window that is as good as the 100K context window. It would need to be basically free per call and have like sub 1 second time to first token and like 100 plus 200 plus tokens per second.
I think you'll get the quality, but I don't think you'll get the costs.
I won't be. I mean, I won't be surprised if we get the quality like early next year. What I would be surprised is if we somehow got them to like sub 1 cent per call. But like
I guess that's why you have all this like KV. You have prompt caching and so on, right? And
yeah.
So, which is why I still think you guys should, I don't know, optimize more things at the foundation model layer. I think
we could. Like, everything we do is like sort of upstream from like. We really like refuse to operate like a dev tools company where we spend like a lot of time on hard technical problems. We solve problems only if like they will make the experience of our customers better. And like it's just like there's so little time left once you've spent all of your time and energy on like making the customer experience better. And making customer experience better is so gratifying because like once this thing like starts to this, I keep coming back to this. I'll keep like pushing this hard. It's like you should get revenue. Whenever founders tell me that like they're gonna give out the product for free first, and I was like, just make $1. It'll make it so clear what you need to do next is to make one more.
Yeah.
Like it's just do it once, and it'll give you more clarity than anything else has ever given you. Because you're like, oh, well, how do I get the second dollar? This dollar was so fun, and then like the second dollar will be like, oh, it's you just have to make this customer like really happy, and then you're like, oh, okay, how do I do that? It's like, well, there's this problem with your product, you should fix it. It's like, great, I'll go fix that problem. It's like an incredible motivator, and you just keep doing that, and so we'll solve foundational model problems. Like if it comes to that, if like the next thing is like, well, the only way we can make the customer experience better is if we like mess with the level at a foundational, like my model at a foundational level, and like that's the final unlock on like making the customer experience better. We will, and we will like more motivated than anyone else doing it because like it's extremely clear what the value output of that will be.
And that makes sense, right? Because and we've spoken about this a little bit, which is where do you actually work, like in terms of like where value is going to accrue, and it feels like value right now is accruing like, of course, like a lot of the foundation model companies, but it's at some point it's like does a restaurant that uses AI products care what model people are using? No, they don't give a shit. What they care about is like what the product experience is. And I think like Greptile is one of the startups where like because of the energy you have and like the direction you've taken, because you kind of pulled that forward and said, hey, like the real value is in the product you build because it's like all about customer love, and thus like that is where the value is going to be created, and that's where we're going to focus all of our time. I think that's like a really powerful way to think about things.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. Like, where the value will accrue, I think is, but I think we should just be taking inspiration from what happened with computers, because LLMs are just like a new type of computer in a sense, and it's a computer that exists in a post-internet world. And so we didn't start off with buying like LLM machines and then running them at home. We started off with having them like serverless on the cloud, and so it's like unintuitive that what they are is basically just computers. What you're given is like computers in a post-lambda function world in a sense. So like if you're given what happened in computers, like I wonder if you were to compare like all the money that is made on internet businesses versus like all the money that's made by anything under EC2, because above EC2 call it picks and shovels, like Vercel picks and shovels, like that's not really a computer company. They're like a they're like a they're almost middleware in a sense, right? So I wonder if a similar thing will happen with LLMs too, is that there'll be like tons of money being made in the sub EC2 level, everyone manufacturing like chips and people manufacturing like computer and essentially like programming the computers and writing operating systems. Like I'm sure they'll make a lot of money, but it seems to me that like a lot more money was made above the EC2, just because there's just such incredibly wide applicability that the number and the volume of successful internet business is surely higher than the number of like sub EC2 businesses. So that's like the equivalent of below the API and above the API. I would think that that's what will happen.
So what do you think is the end game for the code frontier model companies?
It sounds like they want to make AGI, and like I think they'll succeed, and I think that'll probably like make all of our companies sort of obsolete. Like surely that'll happen. This is a tangent, but I'm like really bearish on like AI software developers like Devin, etc. Because I think the reason I'm bearish on this is not because I don't think they'll succeed. I think they will succeed, and the day that they're successful, they will no longer be necessary. Because I think the moment that the models get smart enough that they can write highly functional code most of the times, you don't need the software anymore. Like, why do you need accounting software written by like an AI? If the AI is intelligent enough to write accounting software, it's intelligent enough to account. So like I would just have it account.
Fair enough.
And how do you see, like, as somebody out of the four of us, you talk the most about developers. How do you actually see developers use these, like the Devons of the world and others? Like, what has usage looked like? Like, are people actually really using it, or is it just like a lot of hype around like all these code gen companies? Because it feels like we see all these headlines all the time, but like real usage is still like unclear, and like how much real value is getting created in the enterprise or in SMB or generally. We would love to understand from like what experience has been and the feedback from developers.
Yeah, I think most AI dev tools are good. Like I can't speak for Devin because none of the AI software engineers are really out unless they're very special purpose. So I'm more bullish on the special purpose ones because I think like they'll arrive at very good React AI software engineer before they'll do very good generalist AI software engineer, and like they'll be all the time between like very good React engineer and very good general software engineer, and they can make a ton of money in that amount of time. And in terms of like other tools, like Copilot's great. Like I don't use Cursor, but people that use Cursor love it. I think there's like real value being created there. They love it. They use it every day. Like a lot of these tools, like most of the AI dev tools are great. Like I don't know. It's hard to make a bad AI dev tool. Like the foundational technologies, you're given literally magic. Like how are you gonna fuck that up? That's you're given like this like insane magical thing, and it's like already good at the thing that you're trying to package it to do. You'd really have to like I don't know. It's like I can't imagine a world where you make a bad AI dev tool. You can make worse AI dev tools than other people's dev tools, but I don't think you can make a bad one. Like the underlying thing is too good.
I've got one critique. I've been trying to sneak it in there for a little bit, and I'm curious if you'll agree with it. I think one of the key reasons why your thought process is sufficiently different from a lot of DevTool companies is because DevTool companies tend to often be started by people who really care about developers who are developers. Like developers are kind of I tend to say this a lot, even kind of within Vela. Like developers are their own creature. And also when people talk about developers, they're talking about two different kinds. Like one is like the real true developer, and then there's like the average developer who's not really a developer, but we still
Yeah.
call them developers. But let's kind of leave that distinction aside. I do think that your kind of focus on like the local is, and kind of like leave the other stuff aside that'll come if you focus on kind of the local, is also I think the focus around kind of the customer experience and things like that, rather than focusing away from the hard technical challenges, are exactly what developers don't do. And so kind of like doing a DevTools company the way that you're doing it pretty much grants that it's kind of a contrarian bet in kind of a way that is very specific to developers per se. The other thing that I really liked about Greptile when I kind of read about it was that it's focused on understanding code and not generating code. And most people who have not written code think that writing code is important, but that is actually completely incorrect. Most of the code that's written is complete garbage that deserves to be deleted. The only code that stays is the code that is read more times than it's written. This is what SICP, which is MIT's main kind of like book to teach computing, that's like the first line it starts with. So I think that like on all of those kind of philosophical notes, more or less, is kind of like why I really like Greptile's idea, apart from all the stuff that we talked about.
Yeah, I think there's certainly perils too of being like very engineering focused, but we try to keep in mind is like, well, like we do like solving hard technical challenges. We just don't like solving them for the sake of solving them, which to an extent is like, well, like developers don't like that. I think there's certainly some animosity from like developers towards us. And there's certainly even within our company, like I think like we disagree with the three of us on this, and I think it's good that we provide this balance where like I have the brain of a sales driven enterprise startup founder, and the other two have the brains of like more of a dev tools or research led sort of thing. And we definitely like absolutely need both. If I were to run this thing, you'd end up with like shitty Salesforce and no developer would want it. And then if they were to run it, then we'd end up with like this. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but like this incredible, amazing dev tool that no one uses or pays for. So I think it's like good that we have both. It's also like sort of uninspiring to be running like an enterprise SaaS company where all of your users hate you no matter how much money you make.
I've got one quick follow up to that, which I just occurred to me. Because developers are such a quirky creature, right? How do you know that when a developer is asking for something that it's a real ask and it's not just because they're like kind of specifically like they care about it and it's not important? Like how do you differentiate between the personal proclivities of a developer versus like something that's actually generalizable? Is it just like number of people asking for it, or is there anything else there?
Is it intuition?
Number is one, and then second is like exactly. We're trying to figure out if they'll churn if we don't do it.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Like does it? Okay, I see.
Yeah. Like will it like how important? Like is this just a thing you kind of like, or like will you leave if you don't? And a lot of the times, like when products are in early stages, I think those are fairly clear. Like, there like everything is like at the right middle is dark mode, where like dark mode is something that like developers will leave your platform because there's no dark mode, and like but it's also something that some people just like and maybe doesn't affect churn. And then everything left of dark mode is like very critical and you should fix it, and everything right of dark mode is like not critical, you shouldn't worry about it, and like right in the middle is dark mode.
And what about kind of the balance between like how critical is it and how hard it is to build? Like it comes back to those problems, which is like how do you actually differentiate in terms of like what are the hard problems to even go solve, because because it feels like if it's like that critical, it can't be like they probably would have built it themselves if it was that easy to build.
Yeah, I think when we just like don't solve hard problems unless we have to. Except we often have to, because that tends to be the nature when like you're a technology company. Um, but like we'll just generally avoid them. He's like, why would you go and like, maybe you would because it's fun and sure, like if you enjoy solving hard problems, just like a lot of people do, I do, then like you can go solve hard problems. But like we often joke about this internally too, because like someone like one of the four of us will come up with like this crazy thing we want to build, and then we'll like think about it. It's like that's be really fun to build, but I don't see how it'll affect the business. So it's like a weekend project. That's what it sounds like. It's like it's like out of work hours. You can work on this, and if it's really fun, work on it out of work hours, and like that's probably fine.
Any interesting features that came from one of those weekend? I mean, other than the idea for the project itself.
Oh, I actually think that the Slack integration was a weekend hack.
Mm.
That's a fun one. I use it all the time because sometimes in the middle of a sales call, someone will ask me something about like the product, and I was like, I actually don't know, and then I'll like ask the Slack bot, and then it'll tell me, because everything that's true about your product is in a line of code somewhere. So I'll just
That
tell
makes
you.
sense. And then
That's really fun. I
I
don't think anyone else uses it except me.
no, that's great. I guess the last question to wrap things up is, what excites you the most about building Greptile, and what are you enjoying the most? Because it feels like, of course, like being a founder is a lot of hard work. It's a lot of sleepless nights. So like, what excites you? What keeps you going? Because it feels like you're also having a lot of fun while you're building this, but I'm sure it's a lot of hard work. So what keeps you going? What's exciting you in the near term?
I was in a band in college, and it was just like me and like four other guys, and we would like try to get shows, and we'd play shows, and some of them will be good, some of them will be bad, and we'd keep getting more shows, and like sometimes we'd get shows at cool venues, and that'll be like really fun. And it's just like this group of friends, and we were like we had this like like a common goal, and everyone that had the common goal was in the same room, and everyone was aligned, and we were just like, it was like we're us against the worlding in a way. I think that's still what's the most fun about this. It's just like me and my band, and we're like playing shows, and like every now and then something cool happens, and like we're invited to a cool venue, or like a lot of people come to our show, um, and that's always fun. So I think that's still the most fun part of this. Um, it's almost exactly like running a band in many ways, where like you spend a lot of time refining your product, which is like your set, and then you spend a lot of time like getting shows, which is getting customers, and then you make sure that everyone that came to a show has a great time. Um, and you also try to have fun as a band. And then when you have really bigger shows at cooler venues, it's more fun. And like sometimes like a famous person wants to come see your show, and that's cool too. And fundraising is like being signed by a record label in some ways, at least the first time you do it.
Makes sense.
That's correct.
I feel like that's probably like the most fun way to describe how to run a company. So I think that's a great point to wrap up on. But thanks so much for coming, Daksh. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. You guys should bring me back.
Yeah,
For sure.
totally.
This is like a year from now. I have no
No, that would
hair.
be fun. How
Yeah.
much progress in 1 year?